Now, when I'm very good and do as I am told, I'm Mama's little angel, and Papa says I'm good as gold.
The stars are ageless, aren't they?
This big, fat movie star, Miss Rotten, stinking actress.
No one ever leaves the star.
You brought this on yourself.
Some of the films I've been discussing on this series so far have been kind of obscure. I mean, even I struggled to find a copy of The Killing Kind. When I was researching this series, I was struck by the huge gap between the different eras of hagsploitation. While we've left behind the original hag horror era of the 60s and 70s and the exploitation films of the 80s, which really amped up the sexual weirdness of it all, what came next? The 90s had a very small and very formulaic, low-budget approach to hag horror with a tiny amount of films, like the very low-budget Mummy from 1995, starring an older Patty McCormick, who is most well known for playing the little vicious girl of The Bad Seed in the 50s, and the extremely low-budget affair The Landlady, with The Godfather's Talia Shire as a landlady with the hots for one of her tenants. Last episode I talked extensively about Death Becomes Her, which in the 90s is really the only standout film for me in the genre, and which brought a supernatural and comedic bent to hag horror. But where did all the hags go after that? Well, television. And specifically, American Horror Story. Welcome to the Final Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bagutska, your podcast host. And in this series of the show, I'm exploring the world of one of the most undersung and weirdly commercial subgenres of horror, known as hagsploitation, psycho-biddy horror, grand dame guignol, or simply hag horror. Throughout the previous episodes of this series, I've been looking at some of the mainstay films of the genre, classics like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Sunset Boulevard, lesser known films like Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, The Killing Kind, or Straitjacket. Some of the episodes have been exploring the consistent themes that come up and make the genre what it is. And now it's time to enter the contemporary landscape of horror and see how storytellers today have updated the figure of the hag. It's not always going to be pretty, and there's going to be some mild spoilers. And yes, I'm going to be talking primarily about a Mr. Ryan Murphy. Don't unsubscribe just yet. Stay with me. I have reasons. The anthology horror series created by Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk has now been running for, let me just check my notes, 13 years, and has spawned its own spin-off show as well as a sister show, American Crime Story. Every season of American Horror Story follows its own storyline, and they are loosely intertwined in a shared universe. Murphy employs a rotating ensemble of actors, including people like Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters, Dennis O'Hare, Emma Roberts, Frances Conroy, Jessica Lange, Kathy Bates, Angela Bassett, Lady Gaga, and Kim Kardashian. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you to watch all of American Horror Story, all 12 seasons of it. It's patchy as hell, but what is undeniable, and if you'll indulge me over the next 40 minutes or so, is that American Horror Story, starting in 2011, and particularly throughout the first 5 seasons, updated and reinvigorated a long dormant genre. So let's discuss how AHS brought back hagsploitation. Now, if any listeners have heard my American Horror Story recap podcast, The Next Supremes, you'll already know that I am an AHS apologist. I've been watching this goddamn show for over a decade now, and I will stick to it until one of us, Mr. Murphy or myself, lose the will to keep watching. Or the will to live, whatever comes first. Murphy's work has always been in direct conversation with the original Hag horror films, even before he made the limited series feud Betty and Joan, all about the making of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and the relationship between its two stars. Throughout this episode, you'll hear from friend of the pod and my Next Supremes co-host, film critic Clarisse Loughrey. If Hag horror started off by cashing in on the name recognition of established actresses who were no longer getting the same kind of work, or were perceived by Hollywood to be past their prime, who are, respectfully, Ryan Murphy's Hags, and how has he updated this casting formula?
I think what's great about American Horror Story is that it's the knowingness of it, and there's a little bit of like a reclamation to it of, we had this hagsploitation era and this genre, and this idea that these some of the greatest actresses of their generation got to a point in their careers where hagsploitation was sort of the only thing they could do. I don't like Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, they weren't, or like Shelley Winters weren't necessarily taking these roles because they really, really wanted to play these roles. Desperately, I don't think they particularly did. But when you get to a Ryan Murphy project, I mean, everybody wants to do that because you go into it with the idea that he loves giving actors a platform. And I think he is a director and a showrunner, a creator who loves actors and is always trying to find new ways to present them and to give them new avenues and new spaces to play, whether that is, older actresses who, if this were the mid-century, would have only have had hagsploitation as a forward path in their careers. Here they get the opportunity to play, if you look at the range of roles that Jessica Lange has played on that show, there's powerful witches and cabaret singers, and, sort of slightly evil housewives. And Frances Conroy playing witches, Angela Bassett playing vampire. These are straightforwardly powerful, glamorous, celebratory roles that are like fucked up and complicated, but they're joyous to be and play as well. And I think you see that in all his casting decisions, even outside of casting older actors. If he's casting like a nepotism baby or someone who is like a really famous child actor and maybe hasn't gotten great opportunities recently, he'll say, come on into the fold. Or casting gay actors who never get to play gay roles, and Ryan Murphy will say, hey, come do the thing you haven't been allowed to do because of our fucked up industry. And I feel like that it's just sort of an extension of that. It extends onto older actresses kind of using the hagsploitation trope to kind of almost tear it apart and start it again from new. I think he's very intentional in who he casts. And I think it's, I really want to get away from the idea that, Ryan Murphy's the white knight coming in and he's like, I will save you, Jessica Lange. Like, that's obviously not what's happening, but I think he's very good at recognizing who hasn't been getting the parts they should be getting right at this moment. And I think it's less about him, yeah, coming in and like doing a Quentin Tarantino on John Travolta and going, here you go, have a career. I think it's more, there's a lot of freedom in TV. And I think when American Horror Story started, we hadn't quite recognized that, but I think he'd recognized that. I think using this big, great playground of television to say, I'm gonna just like collect like Pokemon, all of the people that I think are really great and should be really getting cool parts, and I'm gonna bring them all onto this playground. And then because they're so incredibly talented, they get nominated for Emmys and Golden Globes, and they get noticed. And I think to some degree, I don't think he's revitalized anyone's career, but I think he's certainly kind of helped redirect people's attentions. Because I'm trying to think, like, would Angela Bassett have been, God, in the Black Panther movie I think yes, absolutely. But I think it certainly helped to have had her do these incredible performances on TV as just like a little reminder of how great she is.
So let's talk about some of these actresses that Murphy created really meaty and often murderous roles for. Jessica Lange was the first Pokemon that he collected. She was the star name of the first season of AHS Murder House and remained a fixture in the ensemble of actors until season 4, Freak Show. Lange was a star of 70s and 80s Hollywood. She had briefly been a model in New York when she first started out before making her debut as Monkey Arm Candy in King Kong. But her serious, self-described real debut was as the frustrated femme fatale in The Postman Always Rings Twice opposite Jack Nicholson, who glowingly referred to Lange as a mix between a delicate fawn and a Buick. She excelled both as a dramatic and a comedic actress, and has 2 Oscars to her name, one for Tootsie and another for Blue Sky. The roles she has privileged have often been women with the huge inner turmoil. Ryan Murphy himself became, in his own words, obsessed with her since he saw her play Blanche Dubois on Broadway. Years after that, he finally got to cast her in one of his projects. AHS was Lange's first starring role in television, and she was credited with the honorary "and." In the first season, she plays Constance Langdon. Constance is a bitter Southern belle who came to LA with dreams of being an actress and instead became a housewife turned murderer. She previously lived in and now lives next door to the murder house where, as you can tell from the name, a lot of murder happens.
How'd you get into my house?
You left your back door open. Although I have to tell you, Addie will always find a way in. She has a bug up her ass about this house, always has. You have the loveliest things.
Thank you.
Have you got a dog?
I do have a dog, yes.
I run a little kennel out of my house. Doggy daycare kind of a thing. And
How nice.
well, I prefer purebreds. I adore the beauty of a long line, but there's always room in my home for mongrels.
In the second series of the show, Lange played Sister Jude, a strict nun hiding a promiscuous past, her favorite role in her many years on the Ryan Murphy troupe. In the third season, Lange was glammed up as a bitchy head witch for AHS Coven and bid adieu to the show after the fourth season, where she portrayed a German cabaret singer turned freak show den mother in post-Depression America.
I've been asking myself, how is it the devil can move so freely here among the sacred icons? How does a demon wear a crucifix and not burn the flesh it inhabits? And then I realized, it's her. You're using Mary Eunice, her purity, as a shield. What if I were to slit this soft throat and release her soul to heaven? Then where would you go, foul thing?
I might just jump into you. No, you made a big mistake coming back here.
No, you made a mistake, and I'm about to send you back to the hell that made you.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Cane the devil out of me?
This demon, it tricks you.
Lang's roles on AHS are often aged, glamorous women who pride themselves on their beauty, their assertiveness, and the power that they wield over men, and, well, genuinely everybody. While the original films of hack horror really kind of were admonishing the lead actresses on whose name it was capitalizing for aging and for supposedly losing their power, and that was very much expressed in the way that they were made up, most of the time, not always. Have covered some of the exceptions like Barbara Stanwyck or Debbie Reynolds, who were styled glamorously, but most of them were made up and wore their hair and the kind of costumes that really downplayed their attractiveness. AHS updates this core element of hagsploitation, the maddening push and pull of both indicting beauty as the only value that women have going for them and castigating them for aging out of their beauty, and says, fuck that. AHS takes those very hags and makes them glamorous. Ryan Murphy never lets his women appear dowdy or powerless. These hags fuck. They are powerful, smart, and overtly sexual. Many times they are presented as the most desirable people in a room, much more so than some of their younger counterparts. They might be bitter about the aging process, but they are not to be ignored. And our girl Jessica Lange is a prime example of how he does this.
I was not a little boy in the 70s or a little girl in the 70s, but I get the impression that she was the sexual awakening of like a lot of people, right? I don't know, like I feel a lot of people talking about her and King Kong. I feel like a lot of sexuality was awakened. So I think, to be really reductive about her career, I'm gonna have to be for the purposes of this point, but I think she's a sex symbol, and I feel like American Horror Story has sort of made her a sex symbol again. I mean, she never really stopped being a sex symbol, but again, it's just like kind of reminding everybody of, God damn, Jessica Lange is like, she's got some kind of energy. And I think the hagsploitation element comes in where I think a lot of the way culturally that we've been attacking ageism in the past couple of decades, I think, is through this idea of like anger and subversion and like nastiness. And you see this, with this whole thing with female rage, right? This whole trend of female rage. I feel like Jessica Lange, she was there at American Horror Story. She was raging before it became cool. and well, it's this idea. I think it's this idea of kind of undoing the expectations on women in the most like kind of violent and fuck you kind of angry way of, yes, I'm going to come back onto your screens and I'm going to be a sex symbol, but I'm not going to be the damsel in distress. I'm not going to be saintly or or delicate about it. I'm going to play a hard drinking, sort of bigoted woman who lives in a house and screams at everyone. And then I'm going to play a witch who's trying to kill everybody. And I'm also going to play a cabaret singer who got her legs sewed off in a set like underground sex tape situation. Like, I feel like there's a real sort of like, fuck you element to those roles. I don't know, of just kind of reclaiming the sensuality and sexuality of older women, not by like doing a bunch of book club movies, but by doing the female rage option of being like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna play these like complicated, glorious, messy, very sexual women who are also like not really good people, because that's, I mean, that's true freedom as an actor, is that you just want to be able to do everything and anything.
This is one of the most interesting aspects for me, right? Because on the one hand, AHS, with its many flaws as well as its many virtues, is dripping in kink and camp. It's a show that has let every single intrusive thought win. But if we look back at the hagsploitation films that have sort of covered throughout the series, a lot of them pathologize the sexuality of older women. Once they hit an undisclosed age, that might be 40 or it might be 45 or 50. Oh my God, let's not even go higher than that. Their sexuality needs to end. And if not, it is presented as something deviant or perturbed or downright evil. That's why there's a lot of narratives around mothers having illicit. Just go back to our episode on how many mothers in hag horror films have weird feelings about their sons. But I digress. One of the most refreshing and fun things that AHS does is that it doesn't actually consider any particular sexual inclination deviant.
I think it's maybe there's a couple of layers to it, because yeah, in the hagsploitation, the sexuality is deviant in a pure like repulsion level of, it's quite kind of this very conservative idea of, yes, women should never be sexual, but especially of a certain age. Oh my God, disgusting. And, the idea that women lose their value and their currency as they get older. So, if they do not have youthful beauty, why are they here? That's kind of what those movies are like. Why are they here? And I think because Ryan Murphy is obviously enamored by that genre, but he's looking at it through a modern lens, I think he copies over some of the psychology of it, but internalizes it in the characters. And so I'm thinking especially of Fiona in Coven. She's very aware of age and mortality and death and the idea of lost beauty and perhaps lost desire. But the modern side of it, the subversion of it, is that she's raging against it. So she's like even more sexual and she's killing people to try to stay. So I think it kind of tries to acknowledge the misogyny, but then allow that to empower the woman, because we see how we see how she's trying to tear the house down from the inside, I guess.
This is further explored through the character of the housekeeper Moira, who appears only in the first season, Murder House, where she's played by two actresses of different ages. Frances Conroy appears as the aged Moira, and Alexandra Breckenridge plays a younger version of her. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen or heard of Murder House, but this is revealed pretty early on in the show that Moira is a ghost and actually died at the hands of Jessica Lange's character.
Was both Frances Conroy and Alexandra Breckenridge, who play these two sides of the maid of the house, who the ghost that appears to men as very youthful and sexual and come on, hunky guy, let's have sex on your bed. I don't know where your wife is. Don't worry about it. And then you have, when women look at her, she's Frances Conroy, so she is older, and I think she has because she got shot in the eye. Sorry, I actually can't remember. She got yeah, like a cloudy eye. Okay, let me just go. And she got shot in the eye, so she's got the kind of cloudy eye. So there's a sort of like, anti-fearing the disability of the body, kind of that kind of paranoia and hysteria and stuff. So it's kind of that's really playing into quite, I would say, quite conservative, the old conservative traditional hagsploitation ideas. I guess it's doing that to commentate on it by going, isn't it interesting that the men only see this person as, a sexually available piece of meat, and women see, well, they see, because I think they see the wound, they see the story, and they see the narrative of the woman and what happened to her. So yeah, that's an interesting one where I think sometimes American Horror Story has a little bit of a have its cake and eat it attitude to tropes, negative tropes in Suburbia, where it goes, we're going to do the trope, but then we're going to comment on it, so it's fine. Because it is an excuse to have like a sexy young woman like grinding up on the guy. Let's be real about it. But I think, going back to the domestic space, I think Jessica Lange's character then is really interesting because I feel like a lot of her madness comes from, like, she is suffocated by suburbia. She kind of goes insane because I think she's quite the more of the like stereotypical like mad housewife element to her, because the mundanity of trying to maintain very typical heteronormative life is like, ugh, too much.
Moira is perhaps a character that makes it most clear that from the very start, American Horror Story wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to center older women, but also have the hot young things. As Clarisse pointed out, through this dual casting of Moira, the show gets to make a point and make fun of a stock character like the horny housekeeper, at the same time as indulging in this oversexed stock character. And then there's the house, one of the recurring motifs of hagsploitation, and which is the rotten beating heart of American Horror Story. Not just the first season, which revolves entirely around the underpriced Art Deco haunted gorgeousness of a house that would come up again and again through the Ryan Murphy extended universe. In the show's third season, New Orleans' very real and allegedly very haunted Loughrey mansion is shown to be a house of torture and pain.
We're the new owners. Who are you?
I'm Constance Langdon, and this is my fucking house.
In future seasons of the show, the Murphy troupe expanded to include other grand dames of cinema like Kathy Bates and Angela Bassett, who joined AHS Coven, that's the third season, to portray respectively the real-life historical figures of sadistic serial killer Madame Loughrey and New Orleans voodoo queen Mary Laveau, who, incidentally, has never had a movie made about her life and 1000% deserves one, so Angela Bassett's performance was the first on-screen iteration of Mary Laveau. But back to AHS. Kathy Bates, who had made her Oscar-winning feature film debut as Annie Wilkes in Misery, was no stranger to horror from the very start of her career, and Angela Bassett had appeared in vampire flicks like Vampire in Brooklyn and Innocent Blood, and her career spans a multiplicity of genres, but AHS and her continued collaboration with the show has really cemented her as a favorite in the horror space. I would never dare to call either Kathy Bates or Angela Bassett a hag, but I'm not unaware that it is only now in the 8th episode of the series that we're talking about a black woman in a role in hag horror, or let's call it hag adjacent horror, playing one of its star roles. In the previous films that I've covered, actresses of color have only been allowed to play sensible characters, the voices of reason that care deeply for the leading ladies and more often than not ended up murdered. Remember Maidie Norman as Elvira in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Well, exactly. AHS Coven, perhaps more than any other series of the show, is all about older women and aging. Listen, there's a lot wrong with this season, including but not limited to its unbelievably clumsy handling of racial politics. At the heart of it, though, it is a season about older women fighting each other over the power to be immortal and by extension, unfuckwithable.
So have you owned this place long?
What do you think?
I think when they say good black don't crack, they're not wrong. What's your secret?
What's yours? Your manicure costs more than my rent. Woman like you wipes her ass with diamonds. She don't just end up walking in here for hair extensions.
My. Aren't you perceptive?
You know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. Just like I know exactly what you are.
Witch.
I can smell the stink of it on you.
In the series, Mary Laveau has made a Faustian deal with a deity called Papalegba. She sells her soul and her child in exchange for eternal youth and to preserve her powerful position in New Orleans. Madame Loughrey is shown at the very start of the series using a baby's blood as anti-aging cream. Given Loughrey's consistently sadistic treatment, torture, and murder of her staff, most of them enslaved black people, Mary Laveau gives her what she wants, eternal life. But she also buries her, so she'll have to endure eternity buried alive. Mary Laveau gives her what she wants, eternal life, promptly trapping her underground to ensure that she'll spend eternity buried alive and suffering. Centuries after the discovery of Loughrey's murder, she's digged up by Fiona, still very much alive and very much still a racist, to try and barter to figure out how to live forever and be forever powerful. Now, this is getting confusing, and the plot really is not the point. Coven very pointedly and deliberately leans into this obsession with beauty and youth as a poison chalice. Always temporary, always slippery, always with a catch. In this series, power is cyclical, and trying to hold on to it for too long ends up costing each character everything. In the holy mess that is Coven, with all the delusion and lunacy and strange plot twists and body horror, there are these 3 A+ actresses playing off of each other, spewing dialogue like barbed wire, making the season a messy combination of individually phenomenal moments. It's not so much a great season of television as it is a curation of great GIF moments.
Tonight I'm gonna let the whole world in. Get a good look at me. Who's the baddest witch in town?
And finally, we're back to mummy issues, which AHS has plenty of. If the hag, as I discussed in episode 5, is almost always a failed mother, either through the abuse, neglect of her children, or just a failure to be a mother, then all of Jessica Lange's characters in American Horror Story fit that bill. Constance Langdon in the first season has 3 children, and all 3 of them end up dead. And Tate, one of her kids, well, he's just not a great guy from the start, dead or alive. Her character in the second season, Sister Jude, who before becoming a nun was a promiscuous and alcoholic nightclub singer, had ran over and injured a young girl while driving drunk. Fiona Good, that's her character in Coven, is the supreme of her coven of witches and a terrible, insulting, abusive, and neglectful mother to her daughter Cordelia.
This is total. Shut up, Delia. Unless you want me to spit in a third cup.
She's much more concerned with maintaining her position of power than in actually running her coven, and openly uses her daughter and the other young witches that are supposed to be in her ward. Coven in particular explores the taboo subject matter of a mother's resentment towards her child. While Fiona loves her daughter, she also despises her existence and despises the inevitability of being replaced and drained of her power and life force by a younger witch who will take her place. Within the rules of that world, the minute a new head witch, a new supreme, starts maturing, that word, the previous one starts losing her life force, starts aging rapidly. And finally, in the 4th season, Jessica Lange's final full season of American Horror Story, her character Elsa Mars considers herself a sort of godmother to all the freaks in the 1930s freak show that she operates. But then again, she's also using all of them, literally selling them, their experiences and their afflictions.
It's interesting that there is a division between the mother who seems to have had children perhaps against her desires, and is in a way trying to work through a level of resentment towards them. I think especially in Coven, like there's quite a lot of power to that, and a lot of incredible scenes between Jessica Lange and Sarah Paulson of just like the resentment of mother towards child is quite like a I would say a very powerful emotion and a bit of like a taboo emotion as well. And I think part of this idea of concept subversion in American Horror Story, I think, is to explore the unspoken types of mothers. And I think the mother who resents her children, the mother who, air quotes, failed her children because they're, she's grieving the loss of motherhood. That's quite, again, a kind of a bit of a taboo topic. And then with Asylum, again, I think there's an element of she almost vows herself to God because she's trying to reject motherhood at all costs. And then with Elsa Mars and Freak Show, there's a little bit of like a resentful, kind of quite controlling, manipulative mother type there, where she takes in all these people who so desperately need a parent or a caring figure, a supporter in their life, and she uses that need against them to exploit them for money. I think, obviously in that context, she's not the actual mother of these people, but, that is a type of motherhood, and that is a type of, again, taboo motherhood, the kind that we do not want to talk about, the kind that we do not want to think about. So I think
I'm gonna tell. They're depraved monsters!
I'll tell you who the monsters are. The people outside this tent.
In your town, in all these little towns. Housewives, pinched with bitterness, stupefied with boredom as they doze off in front of their laundry detergent commercials and dream of strange erotic pleasures. They have no souls. My monsters, the ones you call depraved, they are the beautiful, heroic ones.
In general, the sort of American Horror Story attitude towards motherhood, and I don't think it's a thing where it's like, oh, and the fathers are all great, the dads are all shit as well. I think it's bad parenthood. So I think there's nothing kind of like misogynistic about this. I think the show is very interested in exploring the anti perfect nuclear family image by just understanding the reality that there are shitty parents everywhere, and that they are behind the walls of these perfect suburban homes, and they are wearing these they look like Jessica Lange beautiful and glamorous, and then the door closes and the monster comes out. And that's, that's the thing of the show, right? Who are the real monsters? Is it the person who is traditionally the monster, or is it, the one who made them like that?
There's other deeply flawed mother figures peppered throughout AHS. Mayor Winningham plays a sexually abusive mother in Coven. Patti LuPone plays another sexually abusive mother in Murder House. Kathy Bates' character in a hotel goes to extreme lengths, including becoming a vampire and working in a haunted hotel to patch up her fraught relationship with her son. And Chloe Sevigny plays a mother so obsessed with one of her children that she near forgets that she has a second child who's just left to her own devices most of the season. Frances Conroy plays the doting mother of a picture-perfect serial killer in Freak Show. And as I've mentioned before, Mary Laveau gave up her own baby in exchange for immortality and commits to sacrificing another babe every year to Papa Legba, literally stealing newborn children out of their mother's hands. American Horror Story, for all its many flaws, recognizes the appeal of watching these actresses be glamorous. It might not give them consistently good roles, but it gives them fun, snappy, often electric moments. Gives them great outfits, great hairdos, incredible makeup. It lets them go off. And that sensibility is obviously rooted in Ryan Murphy's veneration of the actor and actresses in particular, and a certain sensibility that goes beyond camp. Because camp would make fun of these actresses and these roles, and American Horror Story takes them all very, very seriously. And while I have to admit that the later seasons of American Horror Story have very much forgotten about the hag figure and those original structures that I think deeply inspired the show, it's very much privileged younger actors and actresses, as well as, reality TV personalities, instead of well-regarded, well-respected, and frankly, unbelievably talented older actresses. You can't deny that those first few seasons, those first 5, arguably maybe 6 seasons of American Horror Story are where the legacy of hagsploitation truly got reimagined. With all of that said, though,
everyone in this show needs therapy. Desperately. Ghost or not.
Thank you for listening to the Final Girls podcast and the 8th episode of our series on Hags. Thank you to Clarisse Loughrey for her brilliant contribution, and do go check out her own review podcast, Fade to Black. I apologize that this episode took a week longer to make. I had a book deadline to meet that took over everything. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AnnaBDemented, and you can dive into our previous seasons where we've covered witches, vampires, monsters, and teen horror in next week's episode, and it will be next week. I'll be exploring how contemporary hagsploitation has turned to focus on the body more than on the psychology of the hag.